We're going to begin here shortly, so if people could remove their conversations from the room. The mic is on. The Committee on House Administration will come to order. I note that a quorum is present. Without objection, the chair may declare recess at any time. Today we'll consider multiple pieces of legislation that showcase the work of this committee over the Congress. We'll consider legislation that will enhance election integrity, something this committee has been working on since the beginning of the Congress. As chairman of this committee, my focus has been on increasing participation and restoring Americans' confidence in our elections. My bill, the Secure Handling of Internet Electronic Donations, or the SHIELD Act, will do just that. The SHIELD Act strengthens donor verification standards for political committees. Increasing election integrity should be a nonpartisan issue, and I hope today's discussion will help prove that. Other pieces of legislation we will be considering today are also nonpartisan in nature. Our first bill will sunset the Advisory Committee on the Records of Congress. This advisory committee was established in 1990, a time when records management was not clearly established for the legislative branch. The advisory committee met its objective to set good management standards, which makes it redundant to ongoing efforts in the House, the Senate, and the Center for Legislative Archives. This legislation will save taxpayer dollars while ensuring good legislative record keeping. The second bill will make small changes to the House Office of Legislative Counsel. This office provides a critical function to take our ideas and craft them into legislation. Specifically, this measure will designate one deputy to manage this office should there be any vacancy with the Legislative Council. We'll also be considering a bill to establish the commission to study the potential transfer of the Weitzman National Museum of American Jewish History to the Smithsonian Institution. Since 1976, Weitzman National Museum of American Jewish History, based in Philadelphia, has served as the only museum in our nation dedicated to telling the full story of the American Jewish experience. This legislation would commission a study to determine the feasibility of the Smithsonian Institution to incorporate the Weitzman Museum into its collection. Additional pieces of legislation will be considered will honor American values and our history. From honoring one of our founding fathers with a publicly accessible statue in the Capitol to the creation of a congressional time capsule, each piece of legislation would preserve and honor this great country's history. I look forward to a thoughtful discussion on the legislation before us today, and I yield. I'll now recognize the ranking member, Mr. Morelli, for 5 minutes for the purpose of offering an opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for convening today's markup. I'm pleased to see several important bills aimed at improving legislative branch operations and supporting our cultural institutions on the agenda. And as each bill is called up, I'll offer some very, very brief remarks, but I do want to express my appreciation for your efforts, the work of the staff, to reach bipartisan consensus on these measures. And I'm also looking forward to our discussion on the elections-related measures on the agenda and expect to support a bill on the integrity of our campaign finance system. I do some comments with regard to that, however, but I appreciate this. We look to have, I hope, a consensus and support from our members on the bill. And again, want to thank you and your staff and all the members for the cooperation with that. I yield back.
Chairman yields back. I'll now call up H.R. 9488, the Secure Handling of Internet Electronic Donations Act, the SHIELD Act. As noted, the SHIELD Act would prohibit political committees from accepting contributions from debit or credit cards without the disclosure of the card verification value, or the CVV, and the billing address associated with the card. Additionally, the legislation would prohibit the acceptance of contributions from prepaid debit or gift cards. Finally, the SHIELD Act will strengthen laws that prohibit aiding and abetting making a contribution in another person's name. This has been a top legislative recommendation from the Federal Election Commission for years. This bill will strengthen campaign finance laws and enhance election integrity. As we approach Election Day, it's more important than ever that we continue our work to protect American election integrity. I want to thank my colleagues for their work and co-sponsorship of this important legislation. I also want to thank our staff and my Democratic colleagues and their staff for their collaboration on getting this bill into final form. I'll now recognize Ranking Member Morelli, if you'd like to give a statement on the bill.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I am, as others are, deeply committed to protecting the integrity of our campaign finance system. Preventing fraudulent fundraising practices is an important endeavor, and for that reason, I anticipate supporting the amendment in the nature of a substitute before us today. Indeed, the question of whether to include CVV numbers with contributions or ban gift cards and prepaid card contributions is not a new one. Prohibiting, aiding, and abetting the making of a contribution in the name of another has been a long-standing bipartisan FEC legislative recommendation. I do want to, however, make a broader point, which is, in my opinion, the majority could and should have brought forward these reforms at any point over the last 20 months. In fact, the committee has instead focused its efforts on other elections-related endeavors. We had, for instance, a multi-panel hearing on a paper ballot shortage in Luzerne County, Pennsylvania, a hearing assessing the law enforcement response to the multiple pipe bombs on January 6th, 3 years after the attack on the Capitol, a long markup last July on the ACE Act, a bill full of measures hostile to voting rights that perpetuated the former president's big lie and would flood even more dark money into our political system, and the committee's stewardship of the SAVE Act, former President Trump and Speaker Johnson's extreme MAGA bill that would harm every American, but particularly military voters and married women. This bill, the SHIELD Act, was introduced 2 days ago. The majority did not seek our input on drafting the bill. If they had, I would have suggested to my majority colleagues there are some critical issues that I think the bill should address. For starters, the bill misunderstands how online payments processing works and would severely restrict donors from being able to contribute through online platforms. The bill would require platforms to collect CVV information for all online contributions made with a credit card or debit card at the time the contribution is made. Payment card industry data security standards requirements, however, prohibit payment processors from storing CVV information. In turn, this requirement will prohibit processing transactions, contributions to political candidates involving saved payment information. So saved payment information is a key to donors making recurring contributions, something candidates on both sides of the aisle receive. So donors would likewise be unable to use common third-party payment processors like Apple Pay, PayPal, and Google Pay, which frequently do not provide CVV information. The legislation confusingly includes requirements for lawful permanent residents living outside the United States, and I'm not sure how familiar the majority is with the requirements of obtaining a green card, but green card holders do not typically seek to live outside the United States. The language is confusing at best and certainly needs to be looked at and revised. The bill gives the FEC 10 days to issue regulations, something that will force the Commission to regulate without the benefit of public comment. And finally, campaign treasurers are required to retain all contributor information, but the bill fails to specify for how long they have to retain that information, which could mean forever. In fact, if I were a treasurer, I would assume it means forever. That's a big change when you consider the standard 3-year retention policy applicable in FEC regulations. So those are just a few of the examples of problems with the bill. I don't think they argue against doing it, but we would have liked the opportunity in our staff to work to create solutions to these problems, which can be overcome, but there was just not enough time to do it for the bill introductions to markup to fix what I consider some serious problems. So here's the rub. We know what this is about. The majority introduced the bill this week. Without input from the minority, we're marking up the bill 55 days before the election. This is not promoting election integrity. Committee Democrats, we're not going to fall for it. We care deeply about it. That will be our North Star, making sure that elections are protected. So I'll recommend colleagues support the measure, but we should be clear-eyed about the flaws with the bill, and we should, in the future, take some time to make sure that we get this right. But with those reservations, I'll support the bill, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The clerk will please report the bill.
H.R. 9488.
Without objection, the first reading of the bill is dispensed with. Also without objection, the bill shall be considered as read and open to amendment at any point. I have an amendment in the nature of a substitute at the desk. The clerk will please report the amendment.
Amendment in the nature of a substitute.
Without objection, the amendment in the nature of a substitute is considered as read and will be considered as original text for the purpose of further amendment. Does any member seek recognition for amendment or debate? Congresswoman Bice.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm proud to co-sponsor the SHIELD Act, common sense legislation that will close loopholes currently allowing illegal donations to fund campaigns. This is necessary because some online portals are not taking steps to protect against fraudulent donations. When enacted, the bill will require the same information you submit when making an online purchase, a CVV, and an address. I urge my colleagues to support it, and I yield back.
The gentlewoman yields back. I'll recognize myself for 5 minutes, or for purpose of striking the last word. Per the ranking member's remarks in our sidebar just now, would love to engage in working on any potential adjustments prior to this bill coming to the House floor. We could work on a manager's amendment at that time. And so the speed at which this is coming, I think, is important, because I think we've seen some anecdotal evidence of illegal contributions. We have identified this loophole through a robust review of our campaign finance laws, and as this loophole was exposed, we think this is the opportunity to make sure that it's closed. And so I'm proud of the work that this committee has done over the course of 2 years to further election integrity. As this loophole is identified, I think it's imperative for all of us to come together to close the loophole. I thank the ranking members supported the legislation, and will be open to any further adjustments that may be necessary between now and this legislation seeing floor action. Does any other member seek recognition? Representative Kilmer.
Thank you, Chairman. Just briefly, if we're looking at ways in which the Federal Election Commission can be more effective, Representative Fitzpatrick and I have a bipartisan bill called the Restoring Integrity to America's Elections Act that looks at some changes to the Federal Election Commission that are bipartisan, with an eye towards professionalizing it and getting it out of persistent stalemate. So if between here and the floor there's an attempt to look at potential changes, I would just request that that be a bill that is incorporated. So I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Take that under consideration for sure. Does any other member seek recognition for amendment or debate? There being no further amendment or debate, the question now occurs in the amendment in the nature of a substitute. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair is the ayes have it, and the amendment in the nature of a substitute is adopted. The question now occurs on ordering H.R. 9488 as amended, reported favorably to the House. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed, no. The opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the motion to report is agreed to. Majority having voted in favor of H.R. 9488 as amended, the bill is ordered favorably reported to the House. Without objection, a motion to reconsider is laid on the table. I now call up H.R. 7764, the Commission to study the potential transfer of the Weitzman National Museum of American Jewish History to the Smithsonian Institution Act. The nonpartisan legislation would create a commission to study the absorption of the Weitzman National Museum of American Jewish History into the Smithsonian Institution. We're in a critical time where our ally Israel needs our support. With the rise of anti-Semitism in this country and around the world, it is crucial that we're protecting Jewish American history and expanding education efforts. By studying this potential absorption, we can ensure that the museum is maintained for years to come. I'll now recognize the ranking member, Mr. Morelli, if you'd like to give a statement on the bill.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am very grateful to you for working to advance H.R. 7764. As you indicate, a bipartisan bill created a commission to study the potential transfer of the Weitzman Museum of American Jewish History to the Smithsonian. Since the first Jews fled the Portuguese Inquisition in 1654 and arrived in New Amsterdam, what is now called New York City, Jewish Americans have contributed to the country in innumerable ways, which includes my hometown of Rochester, New York, where Jewish Americans have been an integral part of our community, establishing our first synagogue in the 1840s and building a thriving business community around Joseph Avenue in the early 20th century, and contributing to the cultural diversity that makes my community such a wonderful place to live. Across this nation, Jewish Americans have served at some of the highest levels of government, won Nobel Prizes, creating enduring pieces of art and literature, and been at the forefront of virtually all fights for social justice, freedom, and equality. And it pains me, as I'm sure it does you, Mr. Chair, and all the members, that anti-Semitism in the United States has increased significantly, fueled by attacks on Jewish Americans after the October 7th terrorist attacks in Israel, as well as the seemingly unbridled growth of racism, extremism around the country. And I just want to, again, thank you. And the historic levels of anti-Semitism have to be addressed. This is one way to do that in a thoughtful way and move this commission forward. And I, again, want to thank you, want to thank my colleagues and the staff for advancing this, and we will certainly be in the affirmative. Thank you, sir.
I thank the ranking member for his support and his remarks. The clerk will please report the bill.
H.R. 7764.
Without objection, the first reading of the bill is dispensed with. Also without objection, the bill shall be considered as read and open to amendment at any point. I have an amendment in the nature of a substitute at the desk. The clerk will please report the amendment.
Amendment in the nature of a
Without
substitute.
objection, the amendment in the nature of a substitute is considered as read and will be considered as original text for the purpose of further amendment. Does any other member seek recognition for amendment or debate? Seeing none, the question now occurs in the amendment in the nature of a substitute. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. The opinion of the chair is the ayes have it, and the amendment in the nature of a substitute is adopted. The question now occurs on ordering H.R. 7764 as amended, reported favorably to the House. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. The opinion of the chair is the ayes have it, and the motion to report is agreed to. Majority having voted in favor of H.R. 7764 as amended, the bill is ordered favorably reported to the House. Without objection, a motion to reconsider is laid on the table. I now call up H.R. 6394, the Semiquincentennial Congressional Time Capsule Act. This nonpartisan legislation would authorize a time capsule to be buried on the Capitol grounds to mark the 250th anniversary of America's founding. The bill is the support of House members on the American 250 Commission, established to celebrate the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence in 2026. Additionally, the bill already has the support of the architect of the Capitol. I encourage my colleagues to support the legislation. I'll recognize the ranking member, Ms. Morelli, if you'd like to give a statement on the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As you indicated, July 4th, 2026, we'll celebrate our semi-quincentennial, and I want to thank my staff for phonetically placing that before me so I wouldn't stumble over it. But I think this really is significant. The time capsule, as I understand, will be determined by bipartisan, bicameral congressional leaders, include written materials, representations of important legislative milestones, and a message to our future colleagues in the 244th Congress, if we've counted properly. So I'm looking to see what goes into the time capsule, and I'm frankly looking forward to when we open it, because I'll be here one way or another. But I appreciate everyone bringing it forward. I think this is a great idea. With that, I yield back.
I have no doubt there are current members that may be here in the 244th, but it will not be me. The clerk will please report the bill.
H.R. 6394 to provide.
Without objection, the first reading of the bill is dispensed with. Also without objection, the bill should be considered as read and open to amendment at any point. Does any member seek recognition for amendment or debate? There being no further amendments, without objection, we will consider the question to report the measure at the end of the markup. I now call up H.R. 6969 to direct the Joint Committee on the Library to procure a statute of Benjamin Franklin for placement in the United States Capitol. This bill would authorize the placement of a statue of Benjamin Franklin in the U.S. Capitol, accessible to the public during guided tours. I'll recognize Mr. Morelli if you would like to give an opening statement on the bill.
Yeah, just to be very brief, I spoke with Representative Chrissy Houlihan, who's the sponsor of the bill, along with Representative Fitzpatrick, and while there are certainly some references, and this may be interesting to people who have both been here and to Americans who haven't, certainly references to Benjamin Franklin across the Capitol in paintings, and I believe there is a statue tucked away in the back hallway on the Senate side. There is no statue prominently displayed in the Capitol of one of the most important founding founders of our nation and millions of visitors who come by here should see that, and I think this legislation would change that. He was a statesman, a diplomat, scientist, inventor, political philosopher, business person, and really mentored so many people during the most difficult times of this nation's founding, negotiated the Treaty of Paris, which ended the Revolutionary War, helped draft the Declaration. So, on and on we could go. I think we all appreciate it, but I think it is appropriate that we honor him and have him displayed prominently in the Capitol. And I thank you for taking up the bill and for your leadership, and again, thank the staffs on both sides for working this out. So, looking forward to support it enthusiastically, and I yield back.
The clerk will please report the bill.
HR
Without
69.
objection, the first reading of the bill is dispensed with. Also without objection, the bill should be considered as read and open to amendment at any point. Does any member seek recognition for amendment or debate? Ms. Bice.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am a proud co-sponsor of HR 6969, which adds to the U.S. Capitol's National Statutory Collection a new piece to honor one of our nation's foremost founding fathers, Benjamin Franklin. As was mentioned by Ranking Member Morelli, he was the first American diplomat, fostering our nation's relationship with the French government, which helped us win the Revolutionary War, and that endures to this day. I'm excited to see the statue placed ahead of America's 250th birthday. As Benjamin Franklin would say, a penny saved is a penny earned, and this statue comes at no cost. I urge all of my colleagues to vote in support of the legislation.
Does any other member seek recognition? There being no further amendments, without objection, we will consider the question to report the measure at the end of the markup. I now call up H.R. 9489 to sunset the Advisory Committee on the Records of Congress and for other purposes. This bill will sunset the Advisory Committee on the Records of Congress, which is no longer needed, and be replaced with a reporting requirement for the Clerk, Secretary of the Senate, and National Archives. The ACRC convenes twice per year to discuss records management for the House and Senate. However, the Clerk and Secretary of the Senate agree that this committee can be replaced with a reporting requirement. I support this legislation due to the feedback from these agencies that are directly involved with the records management. I'll recognize the Ranking Member, Ms. Morelli, if you'd like to give a statement on the bill.
Simply that I appreciate you bringing it forward and look forward to supporting it. I'll yield back.
The clerk will please report the bill.
HR
Without
94.
objection, the first reading of the bill is dispensed with. Also without objection, the bill shall be considered as read and open to amendment at any point. Does any member seek a recognition? There being no further amendments, without objection, we'll consider the question to report the measure at the end of the markup. I'll now call up H.R. 9487 to amend the Legislative Reorganization Act of 1970 to authorize the Legislative Counsel of the House of Representatives to designate more than one of the attorneys of the Office of Legislative Counsel as Deputy Legislative Counsel and for other purposes. In the event the Legislative Counsel position is vacant, the Deputy Legislative Counsel would be given formal authority to perform all the functions of the Legislative Counsel under this legislation. I strongly support this legislation for continuity of operations and succession purposes. And I'll recognize the Ranking Member, Ms. Morelli, if you'd like to give a statement on the bill.
Yeah, just very briefly, thank you, Mr. Chairman. It has been more than 100 years since the inception of the House Office of Legislative Counsel, which I believe began as an experiment with the House Ways and Means Committee and has become truly a critical House support entity. And the expert attorneys in the Office of Legislative Counsel now draft tens of thousands of bills and resolutions each Congress, and the number's growing exponentially with accounting when you account for the many drafts of a measure as it's being refined. So it is an increasingly number of amendments as well being submitted by members, as we have seen on both large and legislation large and small. So as the demands of the office continue to increase, it's vital we provide the attorneys with the support they need to do their jobs effectively. So that certainly includes both increasing the resources, but it also it requires ensuring the office engages in succession planning, as you said, to ensure continuity of government. So while this may seem like a sort of a pedestrian matter, it's actually a big deal in my view in terms of ensuring that Congress does the job it needs to for the American people. And I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge the current Deputy Legislative Counsel, Noah Woofsey. He and his team do a masterful job working closely with members and staff on the committee and on this committee in particular, we would quite literally not be able to have this or any other markup without both his talents, dedication, and patience, and also Legislative Counsel Wade Ballou and the entire team of the Office of Legislative Counsel for the work they do. We're very, very grateful for their service. The American people don't know their names, but benefit from them every day. So anxious to be able to be in support of this measure. With that, I yield back.
The clerk will please report the bill.
H.R. 9.
Without objection, the first reading of the bill is dispensed with. Also, without objection, the bill should be considered as read and open to amendment at any point. Does any member seek recognition for amendment or debate? Seeing none, there being no further amendments, without objection, we'll consider the question to report the measure at the end of the markup. I now call up H.R. 6242, the Votes Act of 2023, and I'll recognize the ranking member, Ms. Morel, if you'd like to give a statement on the bill.
Just briefly again, I am really grateful for the opportunity to have this in front of us and to speak in support of the Votes Act bill. It's an important bill championed by my friend and colleague, Maxwell Frost of Florida, as well as a number of members on this committee. I co-sponsor it, but I know Ms. Lee is a lead sponsor of the bill. I want to thank her for her leadership and her efforts on that, and as well, I believe Mr. Kilmer is a co-sponsor as well. It's a common sense update to the UO-CAVA to ensure that our overseas service members can participate in our democracy, and it's essential we guarantee every American, we've talked about that at length today, no matter our opinion, we believe every member of our armed forces should be able to cast a ballot. And those we're 10 days from the deadline for states to send out those ballots to our men and women in uniform, and this deadline is a meaningful reminder of our duty as members to protect the right of all service members. So I'm grateful for the bill being before the House. Thank you. Thank your staff. Thank Ms. Lee. Thank Mr. Kilmer and Mr. Frost for their leadership on this. And with that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The clerk will please report the bill.
H.R. 6242.
Without objection, the first reading of the bill is dispensed with. Also, without objection, the bill should be considered as read and open to amendment at any point. Does any member seek recognition? Ms. Lee is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to thank my Florida colleague, Congressman Maxwell Frost, for introducing this important bill, which I am proud to co-sponsor. This bill amends the Uniformed and Overseas Citizens Absentee Voting Act, otherwise known as UO-CAVA, which is how that we ensure that our service members overseas have their right to vote protected and facilitated. This bill expands UO-CAVA provisions to ensure that we include men and women who are serving in our National Guard or in an inactive service status so that they too are covered by UO-CAVA. So with that, I encourage the members of the committee to support this bill, and Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Does any other member seek recognition? There being no further amendments, without objection, we'll consider the question to report the measure at the end of the markup. There being no further amendments or debate, the question now occurs on ordering 6394, 6969, 9489, 9487, and 6242 reported favorably to the House. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the motion to report is agreed to. A majority having voted in favor of H.R. 6394, H.R. 6969, H.R. 9489, H.R. 9487, and H.R. 6242, the bills are ordered favorably reported to the House. Without objection, a motion to reconsider is laid on the table. This concludes the order of business for today's markup. Pursuant to House Rule 11, Clause 2L, I ask that the committee members have the right to file with the clerk of the committee supplemental, additional, minority, and dissenting views on each of the items marked up today, without objection. Also, without objection, the staff is authorized to make necessary technical and conforming changes. If there's no further business, I thank the members for their participation. Without objection, the Committee on House Administration stands adjourned.